Welcome to the Non-Essential Podcast. I'm Steve Gibson.
I'm Ben Matlock.
And we're here. It's a Thursday.
It's a Thursday night.
Thursday night, yeah. Well, it's always Thursday night for me, but it's later Thursday night.
It's October. It's Non-Essential Podcast. In the dark.
Yeah. I like it. It's like this special events.
Yeah, we totally planned this. Windows didn't force us to record the show way later than we normally do. And we're already tired. Like when we do the show anyway. And now it's like
for those that don't have access to me and Ben's direct messages on Twitter, a normal recording time, I went to record and Windows decided it needed to install an update that took 2.5 hours. So instead of like the brisk evening podcast, we're getting the why are we still up tonight podcast. But
why the hell do we keep doing this when there's sleep as an option? Podcast. It's a good question. So hopefully by the end of the show we'll answer it.
We'll answer it. If you've not listened to the show before, the Non-Essential Podcast, we just tell random stories, real things, fake things, creepypastas, all sorts of good stuff. Last week, you had a pair of creepypastas, some shorter ones.
Do a 1-2 punch of a spooky stories that will make you crap yourself.
I mentioned it on Twitter, but we're here, we're on a week later for us anyway. It's a week since we recorded that episode. And I'm still thinking about those stories. And last week when you read them, I liked I forget the name, the House by the Tracks, I think, or past the tracks or near the tracks. Yeah. That was the one that I thought it was better written. And then the Painted Roof or Roof Painter or something like that.
Yeah.
Was the first one. And it's that one was kind of dumb in a good way, but it was just weird. And the more I think about it, the more I like that first one, because just like the killer's calling card being poorly written, obscure emails and then a painted roof. It makes me it's a real window into the things that author thinks about when they're alone at night. I hope somebody's not up there painting my roof. God damn
it's I think, some people, their senses of humor are very random focused, and so sometimes you get those people where it's they find shit funny and you just stare at them blankly what's the joke there? And I think
it's usually me.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we all can relate to that a little bit. There's always some stuff that will tickle us and friends will be why is that funny at all? But I think he took that same idea of just absurd randomness and tried to make horror out of it. And I don't think it totally worked, but I like the idea and I respect the effort a lot.
Yeah, and then that second one, it just pisses me off more and more that boy was so stupidly polite, to the point of throwing himself again and again into harm's way, and then the fucker survived. You can't have that in a horror story.
He's not a reliable narrator because he's this fucking guilt-ridden over minor things, which tells me he wouldn't have friends at his age. Because if you're not willing to do some shit and keep your mouth shut, being a little kid, it's really like prison. You can't snitch, you can't be a goody-goody.
You can, but it doesn't ever end well.
They'll fuck you up. Yeah. I remember when I got shivved in the first grade. Barely made it.
And that was from the teacher.
Yeah. I was like, teacher, they did this. And she was like, well, snitches get stitches. And then just... And I never fucked around again.
So, anyway, to put a cap on the whole the technical difficulties is today was one of those days where as of this morning, I didn't have a topic yet, and
now I'm gonna read the Windows Update manual to you.
Right. And then I was at like work, just like kind of working. We weren't super busy, but I was doing work like you're probably supposed to do at work. And then I realized it was like 12:30, so I was like almost halfway through my shift, and I hadn't even started looking for a topic yet. And I'm like, well, shit. And then I thought, you know what? You did creepypasta last week, and it's Halloween.
I do them
month.
like every other week.
Yeah. But it's extra appropriate because it's Halloween month, and just like the scares, it's like, yeah. So I decided I was going to do something scary, and then
I think I might be remembering it wrong, but I think last October we didn't do anything remotely horror themed.
Yeah.
So maybe we're just trying to correct that now.
Well, here's what happened. I found like a spooky topic to do, and I was like, this fits October perfectly. And I opened up my Google Drive documents or my folders that I work in because I'm a professional, and noticed that I had started some notes on a completely different topic, and I'm like, fuck yeah, started notes are way better than starting from scratch. So my whole point is this week it is not a creepypasta, scary ghost story, Halloween themed episode at all.
Oh, that sucks. You ruined it. You ruined the theme.
Yeah. All for the sake of being slightly easier.
Slightly lazier.
Like, I didn't have any of the script or story actually written. I just had links to like my sources, and it's
a dangerous game you're playing though. When you go back to notes that aren't fresh, we've talked about it before.
Well, like I said, my notes hadn't even started. They were just links to websites, like with the information.
Yeah.
But that's still it was like a half step further than I would have been if I had used an on-theme.
I'm just saying,
topic.
You're taking a topic from a Steve who is way more enthusiastic about this topic. You're just enthusiastic that there was a topic.
So
let's see how it goes. Let's do it.
Yeah. Anyway, during the mid-1800s, there was a man named Lewis Dalton. Lewis was a saloon keeper in Kansas City, Missouri.
That's scary.
He would have exactly. He would eventually marry a woman by the name of Adeline Younger.
Adeline. I want to meet more people named Adeline.
Yeah,
I like that name.
I've got a friend whose daughter is Anna Lynn, so it's not really the same. It's a perfectly fine name in case they listen to this show.
Yeah.
No, I will never criticize anybody's choice of kids' names because we named our daughter Lincoln. So
after the car that you love.
Yeah, exactly. Well, in a way, it was after Matthew McConaughey who
after Matthew McConaughey grabbed you by the throat and said, "What are you naming your child?" And you were persuaded.
Anyway, so Lewis and Adeline would go on to have 12 children, give or take. I think even they probably lost count after a while.
Oh, hell yeah. Just overrun the world with your spawn, dude.
Their son, Frank Dalton, eventually became a lawman working out of Fort Smith, Arkansas, which is where he and fellow Deputy Cole confronted a trio of whiskey bootleggers who had the audacity to open fire on them. Who would ever think that whiskey bootleggers would shoot at policemen?
Which is exactly, now we're starting to think about law enforcement in a different way in 2020. I hear that and I'm like, okay, so these cops totally just opened fire on some bootleggers.
Yeah. Frank killed 2 of the 3 outlaws, but then his gun jammed and he was shot and killed by the 3rd. Cole, his backup, had been wounded early in the gunfight and fled, leaving Frank behind, which is probably smart. Like, wow, they've got guns too. Fuck this, I'm out.
I thought I was making a pissy little jab at police, but now I'm sure that's what happened.
Exactly. They opened fire, and when they got fired back at them, one guy's like, fuck, they've got guns. I'm not.
Oh, damn, Frank, they're better shot. And Frank's like, yeah, I know.
So, Cole was wounded in the gunfight and had left Frank behind to die, which probably made it pretty awkward when Frank's brothers, Robert and Grattan, were hired to take his place. It's like, oh, hey, buddy, you left my brother out there on his own. Oh, don't worry, we totally got your back, though.
What's your name? Cole. Well, that's a weird way to pronounce chicken shit.
Bob, it was Robert, but he of course went by Bob, would end up hiring another brother, Emmett, to join them in Fort Smith. I presume the third one was hired to fill the spot left after Cole mysteriously vanished. After killing a man in the line of duty, Bob struggled to cope and began drinking heavily, which will be kind of ironic given where the story goes, but
finally an honest cop.
Eventually, he would take up an offer to organize a police force in the Osage. I looked it up, and that's how it said it's pronounced, but I'm still not convinced. But anyway, the Osage Nation. A job that his brother Emmett would also help with. The third brother, Grat, stayed behind and continued to work in Fort Smith. So now I'm going to steal the exact Wikipedia line for this next part because I don't think it's humanly possible to phrase it any better than whomever wrote it did. So Bob and Emmett kept up good reputations in the Osage Nation until July 1890 when they began stealing horses. Which I just love the phrasing because it's like they were good until they did bad stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, well, yeah, that's how that works.
Things went well until they fucked up.
And I don't have an exact timeline, but the kept good reputations until July 1890. I think that was like the span of about 6 months. So it's like,
it wasn't even that long. It wasn't like they were upstanding pillars of the community for 10
decades.
Years.
Yeah.
It was like just they rolled into town and now they figured out they could take our horses.
They rode past a paddock of horses and were like, hey, let's take them. Eventually, the locals grew tired of their shit, and a posse was organized to capture the brothers. They fled and were able to hide out in the Oklahoma wilderness, where they sent word to their brother Grat asking for help.
Grat?
Grat. Yeah, it's, what was it? Gratton's his full name, but he went by Grat.
Even Grat? So what the fuck name is that? Yeah, I was going to say,
neither one is good.
I was like, oh, it's short for gratin. Those are both not names.
I think that's a type of potato that you bake.
Grat potato salad.
In fairness, when you have 12 fucking kids, you run. That was probably just the sound the mom made when she popped them out. Like, gratin. All right, well, that'll stick.
You're the one with the kid here, and I'm not entirely sure you know what childbirth is.
Well, about your 12th one, I think they just fall out while you're walking to the store.
If my doctor told my girl to be like, say, all right, bite down, say grat.
Anyway, so they wrote to Grat. He was the one that stayed behind at the initial fort as a lawman. So, of course, when you're a police officer, basically, and your brothers are like, hey, we decided to go to the other side of this, so we need help. He was like, okay. So he sent a supply of horses, food, and ammunition. But he was caught trying to do that and was thrown in jail in Fort Smith, which was probably not ideal for him, seeing as that's exactly where they were holding the criminals that he himself had arrested and jailed.
That would be fun.
Yeah, that's
you know, jail is full of people like, yeah, you were just doing your job.
Right.
We get
it. Grat was held behind bars for 2 weeks. Then the authorities decided to release him in the hopes that he'd end up leading them to his brothers. So, like, exactly like some stupid movie where they're like,
yeah,
I've got a plan.
310 to Yuma for dummies.
However, by the time they released him with the hopes of him leading him to the others, Bob and Emmett had managed to catch a train to California, which I like that it's worded that, like, managed to catch a train, like that was hard to do. Like, I get that the law is looking for you, but this is, like, prior to telephones and internet, like...
I mean, you and me both played Red Dead. You know how fucking hard it is.
I'd like to think that the, like, equivalent of TSA back then is they went to get on, buy their train tickets and they're like, hey... You two aren't these outlaw brothers we're looking for, are you? And they're like, no. And they're like, okay.
Oh.
Thanks
one
for
of
clearing
those
that
fuckers is named Grat. Can you believe it?
So anyway, yeah, they let him out to lead him to the brothers, but the other two had already escaped to California. And I guess, like, the authorities just kind of decided that California was just too far to go to get them, because it seems clear at this point that, or like shortly after, that they knew where the brothers had gone, but they just didn't pursue them. Like, I'm not 100% clear there, but I like the idea of, like, we'll go to Oklahoma, but no fucking further.
I mean, I had a story like maybe a month ago. It was about those serial killing brothers in the old days, and like, yeah, they would just get to points where like the posse would be like, "Ah, fuck it." You know?
I hate California, them hippies. I'm not
They'd be like, "Oh, there might be criminals here." It's like you're hunting criminals. Like, you're already in danger by the very nature of your mission.
We haven't unlocked that part of the story world yet, for all you video gaming people out there. Anyway, so Grat, once he was let out of jail, would meet up with Bob and Emmett a year later at their older brother Bill's farm. Don't worry, these names don't get confusing as shit. Where the two had been working, drinking, playing poker, and getting into bar fights. So, like 100% Old West, like, outlaw stuff. So it's interesting to me. It points out kind of what you were getting at earlier, how often in these stories the difference between lawmen and criminals is just what other people think of you. Like, you act the same way, but...
Yep.
So, once the trio were reunited, Bob began to make plans to rob a train. It sounds like Grat was all in on this plan, because his name was Grat and he was probably just pissed at the world. Bill, the farm-owning brother that was kind of hosting them at this point, along with brothers Cole and Lit, like literature Lit, tried to talk Bob and Grat out of it. Emmett, who was one of the ones stealing horses, if you're not thoroughly confused yet, also seemed to be against the plan, but also pledged to help them out anyway. So it's like, we shouldn't do this, but okay. Like,
I relate to that a little bit. Every time, like, me and my friends got in trouble growing up, it was shit like that, where it's like, you know, in a way, I was the biggest idiot, because I was like, this is a bad idea, and then we went and did it.
Well, you're the one that's like the ride or die. You're like, this is a bad idea, but I can't let you guys go on your own.
Yeah. Also, you know, got nothing to do. Let's see what happens. Let's rob a bank, guys.
But train this time. On January 6, 1891, a Southern Pacific Railway train was held up by two masked men who failed to take any money. However, in the ensuing gunfight, the expressman, which I had to look up, but it's just like a person in charge of packing, loading, and delivering cargo, so basically the FedEx guy, accidentally shot and killed the fireman, which wasn't a firefighter, but the person that stoked the engine, you know, shoveled the coal into the engine. So basically it was very Red Dead stuff where like, we're going to rob this train. Crap, there ain't no money here. And then the other two were just
put your hands up. And it's like, no, I'm with you. And they just start killing their own people.
Yeah. Don't do anything stupid. Nobody gets hurt. It's like, don't do anything stupid, huh? That's just what you want me to do. I'm going to shoot my own guy. Ha ha. The brother's like, what the fuck? These guys are, let's go. Long story short, the two robbers were Bob and Emmett Dalton. Funny enough, Grat hadn't been able to participate in the robbery because he had spent all his money drinking and gambling the night prior and couldn't afford to secure a horse to take him back home in time for the robbery.
He probably would have fucked it up anyway.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it. I don't know if they could have fucked it up anymore. They didn't get anything.
Yeah.
And somebody died, so you're still going to be like chased down for murder.
Somebody died, but they didn't die. I guarantee you, Grat was there. They would have all been shot. By Grat, probably.
They were like, where do we stand to stop this train? Right in front of it, brothers.
Like, if I was assembling a crew, like, for a crime of some sort, like, think about that scene in, like, Reservoir Dogs where they're, like, giving everybody their code names and shit. And if I found out one person in that room was named Grat, I would walk the fuck out. There's no way I would go through on any job if a dude's name is Grat.
Your name is what? It's Grat. And you're like, that's fucking bullshit. I'm out. And you're like, well, no, it's just short for Grat. And you're like,
that's worse. See, like, do you not see how this job's already fucked from the get-go? You didn't go through any of your people enough to get the guy named Grat out of the lineup? Like, there's no baseball team that's batting 500 with a guy named Grat.
The funny thing is his name was probably Michael, but he couldn't read. And so he just kept, and his parents eventually gave up and were like, yeah, it's Grat. That's exactly what we fucking named you. Get out of here.
The whole family was in on it. This idiot thinks his name is Grat.
Anyway, there's like a whole hilarious story here, but to sum it up, the local sheriff pretty quickly figured out that the robbers were Bob and Emmett Dalton.
How'd you know?
No, you're right. And he tracked them back to their brother Bill Dalton's farm, but he failed to find them there. Before he could organize a bigger party to go back, though, federal railway detectives arrived and also decided to raid the farm without first informing the sheriff. So it's like that classic like movie like,
this is our jurisdiction now.
Yeah, that's Die Hard when the feds show up and
fuck it.
Carl from Family Matters is like, fuck you. Like, way to go. And so the Fed and the railway, the big shot detectives went to back to Bill's farm. But Bill managed to hide Bob and Emmett in a secret room via trapdoor and tried to convince the lawmen that his brothers were innocent. I guess like he and one of the federal guy like were getting very heated and the other guy kind of talked him down, but he ended up having to let the lawmen spend the night at the farm and then they left the next morning empty handed. So that had to be real fun for like the brothers that were like up in the attic basically like, why won't these fuckers leave? And they're like, oh, it's late. Can we spend the night? It's like, God damn it. But, so they left empty-handed, which pissed off the sheriff because he was in the process of trying to, like, actually organize something smarter than just marching.
Let me work a fucking case.
Right. So he sent his own men to not only arrest Bob and Emmett for the robberies, but also Grat and Bill for helping evade arrest. Luckily for Bob and Emmett, Bill had already helped them flee California, and the pair were already headed back towards the Oklahoma territories. Unfortunately for Bill and Grat, they had not fled and were thus arrested and jailed. Bill, who really had nothing really to do with the robbery, just hiding his brothers and not helping these idiot cops, he was able to secure bail and was released, and then he began working to prove Grat's innocence, because Grat really didn't do anything. He was drunk in a town over. But meanwhile, Bob and Emmett's crime spree was only starting. Once Grat got out of jail, he would later join them, and the Dalton Gang, as they became known.
Thus fucking up all of Bill's attempts. Try to help his brother. His dumb brother.
That's the interesting thing here, though. Like, so Grat gets out. At this point, they're all back out of jail. Grat joins Bob and Emmett, and they're going on, like, just your typical, like, robbing travelers and banks and trains and shit. But Bill, like, also was part of the gang at this point. He didn't physically, like, participate in robberies, but he was their, like, informant and spy. So he was like their inside guy. So I guess he's like,
cut guy.
Yeah, he's like, well, fuck it. If I can't talk him out of it, I might as well join them. So they formed what became known as the Dalton Gang, and their reputation quickly grew. I know you read a lot of the Wild West stuff. You've probably heard of them, or maybe. Like many famous bands, or gangs, that's probably supposed to write there, of Old West outlaws, they became both feared and kind of like weirdly revered. As for some reason, like robbing and murdering people was both like, of course, like the unforgivable criminal activity, but people still kind of romanticized it. It's like the whole Bonnie and Clyde thing. But back then, these outlaws had this like mythical quality to them. I wouldn't say most people considered them heroes per se, but they were like, they had fans. People love following their exploits. I don't know. Humans are weird. Their eventual success and fame led to bigger and bolder heists, which leads to the part of the story that like actually caught my attention, which would be the famed Coffeyville robbery.
No, not Coffeyville.
Coffeyville.
This is why there's a Starbucks everywhere. There's no coffee here.
Well, Coffeyville was the gang's hometown, and if you're going to make a grand homecoming return, I guess they figured they ought to like do it up right. Their plan called for robbing the First National Bank and also robbing the Condon Bank across the street at the same time. So, like, I like to think, like I said, the Daltons grew up in this area, at least as like kids. And they're like, yeah, we gotta make a splash here, guys. There's two banks right next to each other. Let's go for it. The plan was pretty simple. The gang was going to ride into town and then split up. Bob and Emmett would rob the First National Bank while the Condon Bank would be held up by their brother Grat, along with Bill Powers, which is probably short for William, and fuck him for not shortening it to Will Powers. Like, if you've got that, go with it.
If you got that, change your name to Austin Powers.
Will. And then the third man was named Dick Broadwell, who damn well better have been a porn star on the side.
He damn well better have been the gang leader.
Who's that guy over in the corner? That's Dick. Dick Broadwell. Just talking about Dick. I can dig it. Anyway. So the men rode into town quietly and discreetly and hitched their horses in a nearby alleyway before splitting up and heading for their respective targets. But as they did, the Dalton brothers were recognized by a townsperson, which tends to happen when you're a famous outlaw in your hometown where people know you.
Hey, is that Dick Broadwell? I'd love if that was the guy getting them busted. Nobody knew who the fuck they were. Except they had this one porn star with them. They didn't
even know that he was from Coffeyville, or else they wouldn't have invited him along. As soon as they wrote in, it's Dick! Dick Broadwell! God damn it, Dick.
Took some of those picture things with my wife last night. It was great.
The said townsperson was actually smart enough to refrain from yelling, "Hey, you're those murderous outlaws," which would probably have gotten him shot on the spot. Instead, he quietly began spreading word that the town's banks were being robbed. So by the time Bob and Emmett had filled their grain sack full of sweet, sweet loot, both banks had been quietly surrounded by armed people, just citizens. As they stepped out the front doors, they were greeted by a hail of gunfire. They managed to retreat back into the bank, probably after comically going, "Whoa!" and grabbing their cowboy hats.
The hat spins off their head, and then it's floating in midair, and they have to grab it and snatch it back into the doors. Their overall long johns do that cartoon thing where they stretch out of them, and then their pants catch back up or whatever. So they go running back into the bank and attempt to escape out the back, as if nobody would be smart enough to consider that ahead of time. But of course, people had, and they were greeted by a second hail of gunfire, which forced them back into the bank again. The bank's surrounded. Go to Plan B. What's Plan B? The other door. Fuck. Plan C. Is there a third door? Have we tried a window? Oh man, we're all the way down to Plan F. Jump out the second story window. So by this point, they're pinned in the bank. Meanwhile, across the street in the Condon Bank, things hadn't gone much better. A teller had convinced the brothers that the vault was on a time lock, which I didn't even know existed in the 1800s, but apparently it either was a thing or maybe it wasn't, but the brothers were just dumb and believed it anyway. They've got that bank wizard's magic on this thing. But, of course, as gunfire broke out across the street, someone outside the Condon Bank fired through the window and wounded Bill, in the arm. So, unable to get into the vault and now under fire, completely, I imagine they all pissed their pants because they were completely ambushed.
The robbers in the Condon Bank scooped up $1,500 in loose cash, which I think was adjusted for like today's dollar value, because $1,500 back then would actually be a pretty hefty, haul. But I think it was more like, yeah, that's not bad, but that's not what you rob a bank and get shot at for. And of course, the three of them also took off out the back door, because that's your natural reaction, I guess. Where they were promptly shot dead by a barber and the stable owner. Whoops.
That's... Like I said,
so ultimately, 4 of the 5
sticking their nose where it doesn't belong.
Right. You know what it was, because we still have it today. Apparently every single person in Coffeyville owned guns and were just waiting for bank robbers to come. And so when they did, I imagine it was like that movie thing where they're all singing a song as they were like taking up positions, like a robbery, I'm going to shoot me a robber.
No, deputize me. I can get him from here.
So ultimately, 4 out of the 5 robbers were killed, as were 4 citizens, which I guess makes it like a tie ball game. And let's get into overtime and call it a draw.
Just one of those great shootouts where at the end everybody looks at each other and be like, I don't know if we learned anything here.
Good game. We thought we had them, but the other side put up a fight, and I guess we're all winners in a way.
I guess the real winners are those who took the lesson to heart.
Emmett Dalton was seriously wounded, but he did survive. He was the only survivor of the members of the gang that were at the robbery. But he was sentenced to life in prison. Bill Doolin was another outlaw. Who after the spectacularly failed double robbery, which the whole time, I know not everybody that listens to this show is a gamer, but we are. And one of our favorite games is Red Dead 2. And this whole thing reminds me of a kind of major plot point in that game. Which, it's one of those things, sometimes you read things from real life and you're like, I bet you this is where they took some inspiration from. It's not exactly the same, but I don't want to get too specific for people because no reason to spoil. It's really kind of the major turning point in that game. But yeah, I was picturing that the whole time reading this.
Botched Old West bank robberies are it's pretty much like the word botched and bank robbery go together, particularly in the 1800s, because you were either doing small time, little, heist pickup jobs.
I got a pocket watch and a top hat off of some
or
dandy riding out from New York.
If there was a safe, it was a small safe under a desk.
Or it was a big safe that you blew to high hell, including all the
lost all your shit.
It's funny because you're right. The more and more I read about Old West outlaws, even the big name famous ones, you read them and it's 90% of the robberies resulted in no cash gain.
They were always poor, and it wasn't like where pirates could get a big haul, but the lifestyle of a pirate was you spent all that money really fast, and it took a lot of resources to keep your ship going. So they always looked like shit. They lived like shit, but that was part of the cycle of what they were doing.
Yeah,
Cowboys
the whole thing is they
could
were
have
making
had
enough
more money than they did.
They did.
Really. If any of these jobs ever worked out, but they didn't.
Well, in fairness, back then, the currency was worth such a little amount that you had to steal about 10,000 tons of coins to have made your way off with $100.
Yeah.
That's probably the safest way to guard your money, is just make it heavy, physically heavy.
Yeah. But we talked a lot about, when we have done Old West shows, we've talked a lot about how lawmen and stuff prominent figures in the Old West, there's a lot of embellishment and a lot of bullshit about it. And those are the people who lived, or at least lived longer than a lot of these other ones. It was these people who were actually trying to do the huge fucking jobs. If they actually pulled off a double bank robbery, they would be infamous.
Well, in fairness, they became infamous, but just for the...
But they would be above Jesse James and shit. Like, it would be, you hear about that fucking crew that was like, 6 people and they robbed 2 banks at the same time. Right. Like, that would be a huge deal. I know, but most of the time when people tried that, they died.
Yeah. Which, it also shows you how, like, because it'd be like, oh, these, like, people took to the easy life of crime. It's like, no, that's a fucking hard life. That's why none of them lived. Like,
right.
But anyway, so Bill Doolin was a different outlaw, but after this failed Coffeyville heist, he invited Bill Dalton, who had like kind of been involved in the planning stages, but again, he was in the gang, but he didn't do the robberies. He was the confidence man or whatever you'd call it. But, he invited him and their brother Lit Dalton to join his gang with the promise to avenge their fallen brothers, which is interesting. I'm sure that's how he worded it, and that's probably how Bill Dalton, like, viewed it. But it's really fucking weird thing to me to be like, we're going to avenge my brothers for dying in the line of killing other people. Like, avenge, I think, is the wrong word there. Maybe continue the legacy. But anyway, Bill Dalton was all for it. He's like, hell yeah, I'll join your gang, other Bill. Lit said that was fucking stupid and refused to become an outlaw. Bill,
when something goes catastrophically wrong, I do respect being like, well, take 2. Yeah.
Right. Well, Lit was never ever part of like the gang stuff, so this was just like one of the other millions of kids that's related to these guys, and they're like, hey, you, now that your brothers died stupidly, do you want to go get revenge? And he's like, no, why? What the fuck's wrong with you? Like, I'm an accountant, I make good money, get out of here.
I'm busy succeeding.
Yeah, right.
Sorry.
At which point he was robbed by the no. So anyway, Lit didn't join the group, but the other Bill did, and that gang became known as the Dalton Doolin Gang, or better known as the Wild Bunch.
The Funky Bunch.
Yeah. I hear they applied for a trademark on the name The Wild Bills, but Bill Hickok was like, you better fucking not. Like, I
was actually a badass. You guys are just pretending to be.
And I just love the idea that, like, outlaws had to actually register their outlaw names.
Yeah.
It's like the thing when you're coming up with your PSN ID for PlayStation.
You don't have to register it, but it's like you have to add numbers at the end if you want to be Wild Bill.
Yeah, they became the Wild Bill 6969XXX. Eventually, Bill Dalton would leave the Wild Bunch and form his own gang, which robbed exactly one place before he was tracked to a family cabin and killed by the posse. So,
I think, I don't think you get to call that a gang. I think there should be a minimum amount of, like,
robberies.
Minor crimes.
The funny part is they considered it as successfully robbing the bank because they made off with the money. It's like, yeah, but when you only live 2 days after the fact, I don't know that that's successful.
That's like, not so much a crime as a lethal minor inconvenience.
You basically, you borrowed money with very high interest rate. Emmett, who, if you remember, was the one that survived the Coffeyville double bank robbery, served 14 years of his life sentence before being paroled. Thanks to his fame as a killer and thief, he quickly found work in Hollywood where he became a screenwriter, which is just awesome to me. Like, he's the brother that was like, I don't know if we should be outlaws, but if you say so.
Yeah.
No, now I'm an outlaw and I'm killing people and robbing people. Ow, I almost died. Now I'm famous. I'm going to cash in on this. Like,
now that everyone I know is dead, I'm going to get into pictures.
You know, that means he always wanted to, but knew his brothers would make fun of him.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you're going to be a screenwriter, pansy.
Quit being a bitch, all right? Rob fell at robbing banks with us.
He also wrote a book about their exploits as the Dalton Gang, which he had given to his sister, and like one of those things that he said, here's this book I wrote about our exploits, but don't really show anybody until after my death. So like, the thing I loved most about, well, other than the like failed double bank robbery, which was spectacular, and there's a lot, if you pull up the wiki or the Wikipedia article on it, it goes into like way more detail about the shootout, like a step-by-step accounting of it, and it's hilarious.
Yeah.
So, but it was not like podcast format, but if you're curious, I suggest looking that up and reading it. But anyway, the other thing I loved about the Daltons is the more you read, they're exactly the Wild West movie cliches. Like every type of like fictional character that you would read about in a movie is what they were.
Yeah. Well, they were trying to be, trying to emulate that blueprint.
So I guess he wrote this book, and it was his sister granted his wishes. She didn't release it until after he died, and he died at like 66, but of like natural causes. It sounded, not. It would have been
one
funny
more
if he was
hurrah.
in the bank depositing his huge sacks of money from his screenwriting job, and he got killed by a bank robber. That would have been.
I think it would have been funny if he just put on the hat one more time, tried to rob a bank at fucking
like
66.
89. Yeah. Well, yeah, I said 66 already, but yeah.
Put
but anyway,
money in the bank.
So when the book came out, it was a pretty popular book. 'Cause like I said, people just eat that shit. We still do. I mean, we're talking about it on our podcast, and we've done this kind of topic before. But, so the book came out, and people were like, wow, this is the life of a guy in a gang. Brother Lit Dalton read the book and said that it was mostly fabrication, because Lit had no time for any of his brother's bullshit, apparently. Like, I love Lit. Like, the whole family are just these outlaw, roughneck, like murdered in the line of robbery people, and it's like
dumbasses.
Yeah, right. So I guess out of 12 kids, they had one smart one.
I think I'm aspiring to be the Lit of my family sometimes. I look at my dad's side of the family, and I'm just, motherfuckers.
You've kind of told me about some of your dad's like get rich schemes before, and it's like, no.
Yeah, just
you'll be the one that, like, heaven forbid when he does pass, you'll be at the funeral, and somebody will be doing a eulogy, and you'll be like, nope, wrong,
no.
Bullshit, nope, never happened.
It was
not even like under your breath, just
I would be full volume, and I would just be like, no, he was fucking stupid, and this is what happens when you're that stupid for that long. Eventually a fucking moose falls on you or some shit. Like,
not even necessarily like, I don't want to imply it's you'll go to his funeral to piss on his grave relationship with him, but it's more the like, I'm not going to allow any inflated bullshit to pass.
Yeah, it's not animosity. It's just we're not gilding this. Like,
exactly.
We need to be honest about what kind of life this idiot.
Yeah, I was just afraid I was painting the wrong picture of your relationship, but that's exactly right. Not animosity. Just like, nope.
No,
it's like that movie Big Fish in reverse. Like, at the end, he finds out that, they were tall tales, but they were based in truth. And you're there to be like, no, they weren't even based in truth. Like,
the thing is, at least that dad in Big Fish was like a liar, like, so he always like dolled stories up. My dad would just like not tell me shit, and then like leave me to find out, like put two and two together, like, oh, he got arrested on a weapons charge. Oh yeah, he carried a pair of nunchucks. He just hung them from his ceiling in his apartment all the time. Turns out in California, you can't just do that.
Well, yeah. You live and you learn.
Yeah, he thought, he could be a fucking fat, dumpty Bruce Lee, and it didn't fucking happen.
I hope that when, he ended up getting in trouble for that, and they were like, I assume they took the nunchucks away. Maybe not. I don't know how the law works there. But I hope he looked at him and in 100% serious asked him, so which Ninja Turtle can I be?
Yeah. So yeah, what weapon can I use? I really do hope
the goddamn
that,
stick. I can carry the stick.
Like, I've never actually been to a funeral before, but I hope when I do go, like, I know I'm gonna fuck up and I'm gonna try out material when I have to speak, and I'll, like, if I could somehow get a laugh at a funeral, that would be pretty great.
Just do that thing where you open with and be like, yeah, so just to let you know ahead of time, I'm trying out some new material here. I've got an album coming out and I need to run it past an audience first. So
I've thought about it a lot. I would start with like, okay, we're going to turn out the lights. When we turn them back on, whoever's gone, killed him. You know?
See, and that circles all the way back to that sense of humor that I often have where people wouldn't necessarily get it. I mean, they might get the reference, but they'd be like, "That? How is that like you'd be?" I can see you. I don't know. I'm trying to
what
picture
I would
whether
do
you're
is
one of
like
those-
I would turn off the lights and then I would be gone.
you got to shriek though. You turn off the lights and go ah, and then
No, because I'm doing it to bust the murderer. So
yeah.
if I just disappear, that would actually be the best opening and closing bit.
I'd be one of those. I've been to funerals. I've not given a eulogy, and I think I'd open with that like cliche, like Webster's dictionary defines eulogy as.
What would be great is you do a eulogy. I'm not even involved. It's your family or something, and you just get up and like, welcome to the non-essential podcast. Like you only know how to start things a certain way.
Yeah, but you know, I would catch myself, so it'd be more like, welcome to Uncle Ben's funeral. I'm your host, Steve Gibson. If you've never been to our uncle's
stories.
funeral before, some of them are true, some of them are not.
It's like he's a shitty co-host.
Oh no, I'm picturing a standing ovation. Yeah.
All right, so
yeah,
the gangs of
the Dalton brothers. That was my story
boys.
this week.
Them Dalton brats.
I figured, like I said, I did come across some spooky stuff, but part of it was I had these not the notes, but the references already. And the other part was I was looking at the calendar and I thought, you know, next week is going to be, or not next week, our next episode after this one will be the closest one to Halloween. It's like that whole, like, Price is Right, closest one without going over thing. So I kind of thought maybe next week for Halloween, we could do just like a special, like, ghost story themed show where we go back to where we both do a topic. Try to keep them short, maybe, so we don't hold people hostage for 2 hours.
So like we're on our way of doing right now.
Right now, right. But I thought that would be a good, like, to be an actual on purpose themed Halloween episode.
Yeah, I mean, you know me, I don't have to actually work that hard to stick to like a Halloween thing. This is basically a Halloween show with some deviations here and there on my end. So, but that's a good idea. So yeah,
like any good idea, we talk about it on air at the end of our show instead of wrapping up and just saying, hey,
we'll get there. We'll get there Wednesday. Thing is, like, yeah, we'll ramble about it now. Get to Wednesday and be like, fuck, let's scrap that. Didn't work out. We get really busy. Sorry.
Yeah, this week we're going to just go back and watch a Let's Play and do a play-by-play of it. Sorry. Like,
that'd be all right. That's when we really teeter off and just start doing just not even games we're playing. We're just like watching other people play.
That could be an interesting experiment to, like, we sync up and watch at the same time as a Let's Play of, like, Dr. Mario, but we do it like we're the color team. Like,
I don't know if I could do that. I'd get kicked off the air. But he fucked up. He fucking screwed that pooch.
I wish more sports broadcasts were like that, though. Honestly,
that's how me and my friends like talk about baseball and shit.
Right.
When we're watching. Oh my god, he fucked that dog.
Right. FCC rules should not apply to home broadcasts of sporting events. They would be so much better. Like, they could drop that pretense where not all of them do this anyway, but a lot of them try to do that where it's like, we're the home broadcast, but we're not going to be the homers a little bit, but like we're try to
be analytical. We're going to be fair. And then you have the other ones where it's like, this team hasn't won in 50 years. I've watched them every day for 50 years not win, and god damn it, I want them to win.
I would love that if they could drop those pretenses, be 100% homers, but also like swear like the rest of us that are at home watching it, and like threaten the refs and that whole thing. Like,
yeah.
Anyway, that's a tangent to end your night on.
Yeah. But I gotta go. I gotta go to the bathroom. I gotta eat something in that order. I'm not leaving the bathroom until I eat something.
Well, you could save time by doing both at once.
But yeah, so we're done. And we'll be less done next time. So see ya.
Goodbye.